folks, we are live. And after we had a hiatus for a month. I mean, I don't know whether you realise that, but there we go.
I didn't know. No, did we?
Okay.
There we go. We did. We missed May, but then it was half term, so hey. But because we've been doing all of the men as allies thing as well, so we've been here.
Yeah, so that would have that's why.
Yeah.
So this evening we are talking about reconnecting with ourselves. So I know before we kind of came on, I was going to say on air, live, whatever you want to call it, we were talking about what do we actually mean by this. I think I think is it Ralph Waldo Emerson, the quote that says, "To be yourself in a world that's trying to make you into something else, that is the greatest accomplishment," or something like that. Is that about right? And I think that sums it up quite well, because the world is trying to push us harder, move us faster. Success looks like something that's over there rather than what's over here, and we've always got to have more, and yet actually so gradually we're moving further and further and further and further away from the very essence of who we are. And actually in that disconnect, like that's what lives stress and all the rest of it. So it's a huge topic, and we were just having a quick discussion as to whether this is going to be a two-parter, but watch this space. I don't know what your thoughts are. Is it that simple, that it's just because of the world is pushing so hard?
Well, I think there are many factors at play in it, and I guess the first thing we do have to talk about, if we're talking about reconnecting with yourself, is why we're disconnected from ourselves. And what I know about my life, Laura, my journey is I remember being a little one, and all I wanted to do was love everybody and everything as much as I could. That's all I wanted. And the world told me from a very early age, no, you can't do that, mate. Can't do that. For all sorts of reasons, because I was a boy, because, all sorts of things. So ever since then, I have been gradually disconnecting from myself, right? Because I stopped trusting myself. I stopped trusting my gut feelings and my heart, because people kept telling me I was wrong. You can't follow that, mate. No, that's wrong. That's wrong. So I stopped trusting that. Then of course, we start creating the mind-made prison, the thought processes, our mind trying to keep us safe. Because as we've mentioned many a time on our chats, we are Stone Age in our wiring. We have Paleolithic emotions and nervous system, right? So our mind tries to keep us safe. And by doing that, we gradually build walls and thought processes and all these things that keep taking us away from who we are. Then we enter adulthood and we enter the world and we start building careers and we start having relationships. And each bit of those, because we've come out of our childhood, we've damaged self-worth and self-esteem because we've been taught we can't be ourselves. We now go into relationships and into the world dysfunctional. We're now dysfunctional adults. We have dysfunctional minds because of our upbringing telling us we can't be who we are. And we start hiding bits of ourselves, and we start playing roles, and we start wearing masks, and we build armor to try and protect ourselves, all of which takes us further and further and further away from who we are. And part of what happens to us in midlife, and we call it a midlife crisis, but it's not, suddenly that dawns on us. We suddenly go, oh, so who am I again? Because we played that many roles, we've worn that many masks, we become mum and dad and your job title and what car you drive and where you live, and none of that's you. But that's who we think we are. We think we're all these roles we play. We think we're our personality. We think we're where we're from. All these things. That's not us. And all of that stuff throughout life just takes us further and further and further away from who we are. And what happens in midlife is we go, oh, who am I? And this is what reconnecting with yourself is getting rid of all this crap you've picked up along the way. Getting right back. What did I love doing when I was 8 years old? That's who you are. What do I value? What do I really care about? How do I want to make my mark on this world? What are my unique gifts and talents? What am I here to do? What do I really care about? Why do I care about that? That's good, you are.
I'm going to challenge you slightly. So if you've read Bruce Feiler's book, oh, I can't pronounce his surname, but Life is in the Transitions, he will challenge you and say there is no such thing as a midlife crisis. So, but I'm going to put it to you as more that it's, because you're right, Dan, there is, you go on this path and life tells you that this is what it should look like and what you should be doing. And you kind of set up this narrative for yourself that there's a right and a wrong way. And, you're conditioned in that thing. And I think the reason why Bruce says there's no such thing as a midlife crisis is because that disconnect or that realization can come about because of a life event, what he would call a major quake that allows you to wake up and go, how have I allowed myself to do that and go so far disconnected from myself? So I think, it's not that I'm completely dismissing the idea of a midlife crisis. I think
it's what we call it, Laura, isn't it? It's probably more of a transition, isn't it? It's a season.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, and he would argue that, everybody goes through between 3 and 5 major quakes in one's life. And at that point, you are having to reconnect. But Mark, I don't know. What are your thoughts? Are we gradually disconnecting from the moment that we're born? Is that how it works?
It's interesting. I didn't know I'd be talking about transitioning here today, but are we disconnecting from the moment we're born? No, I don't think we are at all. I think we're disconnecting from the moment we become conscious. The moment we become self-aware is probably a lot of where we begin to disconnect from when we suddenly develop the ego or the id and begin to go, well, whoa, God, that hurt. That criticism is not something I want to experience or feel again. And we put those barriers in place to make sure that doesn't happen. And I think then it's like when you see someone who is in a very good connection with themselves, then you it's not that you would try to, but you can't take them down. You can't find ways to attack them because they're like, well, it's fine. This is me. This is who I am.
Buttons to press, right?
No, so they're like, that's okay. Like, it doesn't matter what you say. So, which goes to show you that there's something that the rest of us have when we have those buttons, because in an instant that button can just change us. Like, what do you mean? And when I was thinking of doing, if I had more time in that TEDx talk I did about the magic of being yourself, I was going to stand on stage and do this, like, and be right, who's coming at me, and give this idea then of just putting the hand on the shoulder and go, you know what? It's okay. Like, I got this, and letting the ego kind of go and letting it go its own way, because it's there to help us and it's there to defend us. Like, it's not like it's a bad thing only because of what we've made it do in its own way. But it's just protection. It's just a warrior there to defend us, and maybe in the wrong way. So it's a question, like, are we disconnected from the start? I don't think so. There always roots back into where we are, and we'll do bits and things that are us. And even to the point where that book was challenging the idea of a midlife crisis. Like, it becomes a crisis in inverted commas because we've been going in one direction for so long that's against who we are, that suddenly it feels like it's like we're coming to a corner and we can't keep going in this direction at this speed, because if we do, we can't take this corner. So the slowing down needs to happen. And unfortunately for a lot of people, midlife crisis becomes, well, okay, then I need to repeat what I've already done, as in get married again, have another family, do all exactly the same things because that worked the first time. Well, it worked the first time because you were 27 years old. It worked the first time. Hey, not to dismiss it doesn't work the second time. But if it's your only answer to the question, right? I mean, that's not really the question you're being asked. You're not being asked to try and find the happiness you had 20 years ago. That's not the question. You're being asked to find who you are today.
And that is the critical point. And I think that's the thing is, I think it is the fact that we tried to fit into a model that has actually we've moved on for, because life events have happened. So, things have happened. We've learned from it. We've discovered what we do and don't like. We've become more attuned to it. But actually, we're still trying to fit into a model of ourselves that's sort of kind of outdated. So we no longer belong in that same space because we have evolved. But we try to, because we haven't got time to sit and pause, we say, to reflect on who we are now, what matters most to us now, and therefore what do we want right now. So back to this word crisis, it becomes a crisis because then in that moment we don't have those tools. And I think that was because we're not taught those tools. We're not taught the tools to be able to constantly reevaluate how we can reconnect with ourselves in any one moment without it being this huge, massive exercise where we're going to go, oh, what do I do now? Because I'm so, because usually, I mean, and I guess probably, I suppose the thing I've gone to in my head is, the signs of disconnection and leadership, in life, whatever, whether it's leadership, life, whatever, it comes as stress, anxiety, burnout, the list is long, but we'll probably recognize that, i.e. the symptom, as opposed to the root cause, and then not really know what to do with it. Because actually we've got the problem, right? Or have I massively oversimplified it?
No, I think that's really insightful, Laura. It is. And one of the things the world does to us from a really early age is as I alluded to earlier, it teaches us not to trust ourselves. We have this wonderful inbuilt inner guidance system, our conscience, our intuition. When you see other animals, when you watch migrating birds, or you see how animals behave when they follow their instincts, like the Boxing Day tsunami of 2004, before the wave could even be seen, the animals were gone. They'd run for the hills. The humans are all standing on the beach going, oh my God, look at the big wave. Who died? Not the animals. We didn't follow. We've been taught to override our inner guidance, to try and rationalize our way and think our way through things. So that's the fundamental disconnect we make with ourselves when we stop trusting our heart and our gut and our intuition and our conscience and our guidance. And the trouble is, in this world, it suits the people in power to have us all disconnected. It suits them for us not to know who we are, not to be able to nail our colours to a mast. We're much more easily manipulated. We're much more easier managed. We're much more susceptible to fear because we've lost our inner sense of what's right and wrong. So we get told what's right and wrong. Right and wrong is just a perspective, right? But we all know what right and wrong is because we feel it. And instead of teaching our kids to listen to their conscience, we teach them not to trust it. We put rules in place. We shackle people, and that this totally and utterly disconnects us from who we are. And part of the work I've been doing with myself in the last kind of 5 to 10 years is reconnecting with that and listening to that and sitting with that, my inner guidance, not my discerning mind, which is telling me, as Mark said, your ego it's there to protect you. So that discerning mind is trying to protect you, and often from dangers that don't exist, dangers that your mind has created. and then you get thrown into fight or flight, and then you lose all that beautiful stuff that makes you human. And you're right, Laura, the sign that you're disconnected is anxiety. If you're chronically anxious, I was for about 10 years, constant feeling of dread in my solar plexus, you're disconnected from yourself. If you're depressed, you've got no get up and go, you've got no purpose, you've got nothing means anything or matters to you. You're disconnected from yourself.
It's really interesting that you say, that the powers that be, it would like us to keep us in that place, because actually the irony of it is right now, they are trying to flip the script and wanting us to have greater sense of personal agency and to reclaim agency, because they know that the world has become even more complex, and therefore they can't have it so that they can keep us in one space. So they have to have us really connected to ourselves to be able to have a sense of personal agency. Anyway, I'm not going to go down that path because that one could take us on a merry little journey, a journey that we're not going to tackle this evening because we could still be here till this time tomorrow evening. But I guess the thing for me is and I suppose for me personally, I think I'm always trying to be myself, and I think it's more that the world has tried to tell me that I have to be something else. I remember very vividly, I must have been about 3, 4 years old, and we were on a ferry, and I just being a 3-year-old. And I think this is one of my very early memories. And I was so excited because there was this group of musicians on the ferry, and they were playing music and all the rest of it. And I ran off, and my parents all had this dance. And I was dancing really, really happy and everything else like this. And I was being myself. But the reaction that I got was so extreme that I still to this day remember. And I've spent, I think, all so long, I have tried to be the person I am, but the world has tried to mold me into something else. And I literally have felt that discomfort, that disconnect. And I think it's hard in that space because people don't really see that. But I guess the world is quite critical of people being themselves. So, I've got to the point where, like, this is me, I can't lose anything else. I've lost everything once or more than once. So therefore, this is me. But, I see many others who try to be themselves, and the world is so quick to criticize or to put them in the box because they don't understand, they're not compassionate, which actually just fuels that disconnection from people's selves.
There's a lot in that. Laura,
my belly brain has been full on.
That deep intake of breath that just said everything, Mark.
Yeah. Well, I was like, okay, I have about 18 different points here. How long have we got? Well, like that idea that you're talking about there about the world and fitting in. Like, if you think about it, you're born into a family, most of us, and then you find a place in that family to fit into the family, right? And then you start school and you realize you have to adjust how you are to fit into school and develop friends. Then you go to another place, and again you're trying to fit into a larger school, a secondary school, and then maybe university or a job, and you spend a lot of time fitting. And I'm saying to my daughters in particular, I'm saying, like, okay, one's leaving the primary school and going to secondary school, she has a group of friends. Like, look, you're never going to see most of those girls again because it's a new school, it's a new space, they just don't exist in your world. And this school might be hard, you might not find your people, but if you go to college, you'll find your people. Eventually you'll find people where it's less of fitting in, it's more of okay, these are like me in different ways, and that's a good thing. But because we've become so used to fitting in, it's easy to lose yourself when you're always fitting in. And what I like to say around that is, I see fitting in as it's nearly like there's a hammer, there's a world out, and just hammer us in so that we fit into this world, right? Instead of, let's take a step back and we build a world around us instead. We build a world that suits us. And if we're to bring that to much of the good stuff that's happening in our modern world in relation to understanding neurodiversity a little bit better, and how we're beginning to see a need for building a world to help people so that we can understand them, some people who are neurodiverse, as opposed to them having to fit into the modern world. And both of my daughters are neurodiverse, arguably both the adults in the house as well, but that's the testing hasn't been done yet there, right? But and so it's like trying to tell them you need to do this because that makes life easier, right? But no, wait a second. What if we understood you instead? Then we can make the world easier instead of that other opposite thing that doesn't work in the same way. And I think what's interesting when we talk about this, trying to fit in, trying to be ourselves, we need to afford ourselves the liberty we would afford someone else. We need to afford ourselves the compassion we would afford someone else. And we need to afford ourselves the permission not to be offended, the permission to just be and allow that to be, and not to have to be concerned or worried about why that's going to be portrayed in the world. We're not here to shine anyone else's light. Like, we're only here to shine our own. And that's kind of our task in it. But it needs strength, it needs courage, it needs some bravery, it's a surprise, it needs a lot of things that we kind of lose touch with a bit. And Dan touched it rightly there. When you're very young, you go back to what you know, what you love. Like, you're in those zones. Like, when you're in that zone of flow, that's yourself. There's nothing else but yourself in that space. Like, I get it. I was only thinking about the other. I get it. If I'm standing in front of a room of people, I'm in flow. Like, I'm gone. I can tell anything, talk anything, and I'm in flow. And I realized when I come out of it after, it's like, Jesus, I don't even remember what I said there. But I don't need to remember what I said, because I know whatever I said was relevant to where I was because I was in that space. And that's real magic. That's being yourself in the space.
Carl is saying here, hold on a moment, it feels safer to follow than to lead. And that's true, I think. You know, it's totally true. You know, but, you know, I think that the thing for me is, you know, you're right. It's this whole thing sometimes, you know, fitting in can feel sometimes easier than actually standing up and being yourself. But I think there's also a part that says to me, there is a real emotional cost of trying to fit in, though, isn't there? Mm-hmm. You know, and, you know, when you're in flow, I mean, the way you describe that, Mark, when you're on stage and you're fully in flow, you can't remember what you said because you're totally, you know, you get off the stage having done that, you know, you probably feel very different to when you're standing in trying to really, you know, have to really put yourself into a space. There must be a complete emotion, a different emotional charge to both those situations.
Very much so. But there's such a freedom in one of them. There's such a freedom in the space. And I suppose that's the thing that we're all trying to touch into. Where do we find that freedom in our life? Because that's a liberty to be that free, to be able to just express in whatever way that matters. And like, but one thing I love it when you're just walking along the street and you see somebody recognizing somebody else. And you know the way, like somebody walking, they might be head down or headphones are on and maybe they look a bit grumpy and then they get recognized and they turn and they smile and they get seen and they get recognized. And I think I'd love that for all of us, you know, to be recognized, to actually be seen for who we really are, because then we can all smile in that way and just be free in that space, because that's what we deserve. We deserve to be seen.
And I think that's absolutely it. We all need to be seen just the way we are, you know, as opposed to how people want us to be.
Or how we want to be seen.
Or what we think we're expected to be seen.
Yeah. and there is a truth in that, in what we're expected to be. I mean, you know, trying to live up to that expectation of what we're meant to be. Trust me, I tried many years and failed many years to try and live up to that expectation.
Yeah, me too, yeah.
And funnily enough, I failed miserably. I just made myself very, very ill instead, because I was never going to be an accountant. So needless to say, I shouldn't have even tried. I mean, you know, like, come on, I have a curly whirly brain, you know, tick some boxes and whatever else. It's never going to be me. But you know, when I guess the thing is, you know, when you go back to, you know, recognizing that disconnect, how do we recognize that disconnect, and how do we kind of in the moment return back to ourselves? I mean, I guess that's the big thing, is how in the moment do we recognize and catch ourselves that we're starting to drift?
How you feel, that's how to do it. I got a really interesting message the other day from a CEO who I was conversing with, and he said to me, "It's not about how I feel, it's about getting the work done." And I said, "My friend, if it's not about how you feel, you are headed for disaster. Because you are not a human doing, you are a human being. And if you're not making any time for being, you're heading for illness, heart attack, divorce. And then where's your business going to be, my friend? Where's it going to be without you?" It's not about getting things done. It's about how you feel. Now, how you feel is a very good clue. If you feel anxious, if you feel depressed, you have disconnected from yourself. If you feel at peace, if you feel happy and pure joy and bliss, that's who you are. That's being yourself. You know, what Mark talked about there, and I'm exactly the same. I come alive in front of a group of people and I talk from the heart. This thing shuts up. There's no self-editing going on. There's no worrying about how I'm going to be perceived. There's no performance. I'm just being me. The same when I play sport, when I cross the white line and I'm on a football field. I'm just being me. I'm not thinking about anything. I'm not worried about how I'm perceived. I'm not self-editing. I'm not being self-conscious. I'm just there. I'm in the moment and I'm being. So yeah,
I'm going to go one stage further down to your point around it's just feelings or emotions. I'm also going to say it's also behaviours. We have to notice the behaviours.
And that's exactly right. So that feeling, when we start feeling bad, lots of us try and push it away or ignore it or bury it down. Then we start looking for short-term gratification. And what also happens is, and this is what happened to me, when I built my suit of armour to protect me from the world and protect me from emotional hurt and to protect me from loss, I stopped feeling joy. So not only was I blocking out the bad feelings I didn't like, I was blocking out all the good stuff too. So, and when I stopped feeling joy, I'm looking for pleasure because I want to feel good. We all want to feel good. We're all chasing ways of feeling. That's what we're doing. Every action we take is with a result in mind, and that result is a way of feeling. That's what we're all looking for, is ways of feeling. So if you're doing self-sabotaging type behavior, unhealthy type behavior that's putting pressure on you and your relationships and the people around you, harmful behavior, that's a good and sure sign that you need to reconnect with yourself. Now, you asked a question there, Laura. We said, how do you get back to yourself within the moment? First of all, there's a bit of soul searching that needs to be done. You need to turn your attention inwards. You need to start asking yourself some powerful questions. You need to start trying to understand what you really care about. And what tells you that is how you feel. What lights you up? What makes you passionate about? What puts you in that space of flow that Mark talked about there, where you can just talk and you're not self-conscious, you're not self-edited. They're really big clues as to who you are. So in the moment, we need to learn to be able to regulate our emotions and our nervous system, because both those things will take us away in the moment from who we are. Mark talked about earlier, you can recognize someone who's connected with themselves because you can't trigger them. So if you're being triggered, there's a clue. Pull on the thread. Why is that triggering me? Because there'll be some sort of trauma, something that needs your attention, something that needs healing. And when you can learn to regulate your own nervous system, your own emotions, so you don't get carried away, the red mist doesn't descend, you don't lose all sense of what's going on, then you get the clues. Now what? So why did I get offended by that? Why did that really annoy me? Why did that stress me out? Then you get to find out, there's that little bit of trauma there somewhere, that belief I've got about myself. And then when you understand that, that's when you can start working to clear it away. And when you clear that away, what's left, that's you.
Yeah. So Mark, how in amongst all the noise of modern world, how do we return to ourselves when you feel lost in the noise?
Well, it's always interesting. A brilliant quote I read today was that the sea reflects us way better than the mirror does. And I was thinking about that. I was like, well, why? What does that mean? Because in the mirror, we're judging ourselves. We're looking, going, oh, look at how I'm looking heavy, I'm looking fat, I'm looking old. Or we can't see our own face. But the sea is something in constant flux, in constant movement. It's always becoming the next wave. There's the next wave. It comes in and it goes out. And that's what we are always doing in that way. But so, look, how do we begin to connect? Where are the spaces that give you joy? Where are the spaces that light you up? Like, to Dan's point there, like, isn't it amazing how many clients you work with? Like, and there could be CEOs or MDs, it could be anything. And you'll be talking to them, like, what do you do? They'll tell you, like, they'll light up as they're telling you about, hiking, and I love hiking. Or they'll light up when they're telling you about, like, playing board games, let's say, like, right? Anything. And you go, well, when was the last time you did that? God, I don't know. Can't remember. Hold on, like, wait, but what do you mean you can't remember the last time you did the thing that lit you up? You lit up talking about it. So what are those things? Where do you bring those back into life? But I think too, because our world is so busy, we sometimes need to stop and pause. And if Carol would permit, a very quick story on a great story about these guys traveling across a jungle. And this guy, he had to get through this jungle, right through to the other side of this country. It was in Africa, to get a boat to leave within he had 4 days to get this boat, and it took about 3 days to get through the jungle. And after 2 days, the guys were 2/3 of the way through the jungle. They were flying, with no bother at all. And then they sat down, and I was like, okay, fair enough. You need to sit down. You need to take a rest. These were all the guys he'd hired to bring all his equipment and everything. And but 4 hours later, still not moved. 6 hours later, no movement. whole day, no moving. Your mom was getting frantic. He's like, what? We gotta move. And the guy goes, we can't move. We have to let our souls catch up. And I think for us, there's a part of that in our modern life. Like, we're not letting ourselves catch up with ourselves. So where do we reconnect? Do we get out into a forest? Do we get up to a mountain? Nature can reflect us back to ourselves in the most loveliest ways. You can have thoughts and you can see and realize things about yourself walking along in the silence of the mountain, because you meet yourself in those spaces. You don't meet yourself in the modern world because we're always distracted. Like that line about you can't, most of humanity's problems comes because we can't spend time alone in our room. We can argue, we can, but we have our phone in our hand. We're not alone. We're nothing but alone. So where do we meet ourselves in those spaces? That's how we begin to connect. Those spaces we meet ourselves, whether that's in joy, whether that's in movement, whether that's in nature. What is it that we meet ourselves?
So true. Now I'm conscious of time because Dan's screwed up his diary basically. But so I know, harsh.
Luckily, Laura, I'm comfortable in my own skin, so you can't trigger me.
I'm so glad that you are, Dan. I'm so glad you are. So tell me, to close, for one invitation for anyone feeling disconnected right now, what would you say to them?
Yeah, I mean, Mark nailed it there. It's slow down, take a pause, take some time off. Even just a day or two. Go for a walk on the beach. Think about, what did you love doing as a child? Because that's who you are. That's what lights you up. Go and do that. Just for 5 minutes, just for 10 minutes, whatever that was, what you used to like doing. That's a real big clue before the world really got to you. But yeah, you've got to slow down. Put the phone away for just half a day. Stop answering emails, text messages, all that distracting stuff that uses up all our mental energy and our attention and our capacity. Shut all the noise down for a bit. Be brave enough to be with yourself, to look at yourself, warts and all, because it's all okay. It is all okay. Drop the shame, the guilt, the judgment, everything else, the rationalising, the assumptions, the second guessing, and just be with yourself. Even if that's with other people, be with yourself, but with others. Oh, what was that?
From the outside.
It felt like it was a fire alarm there, and I had to leave the building. And that's, I think that's the key, Laura, and because we don't do that in the modern world. We're always doing. There's always something to do. There's never going to be a time when there's not something to do, right? So just cultivate that bit of space, even if it's just 5-10 minutes a day. And I'm going to have to go. I've just had a message from my wife going, I thought you were finished at 7. So it's lovely to see everybody. I'll catch up with you guys soon.
See you soon, Dan.
Bye. So, Mark, go on. Let's close with your final thoughts. And Carl is asking, where are those monks? I mean,
I would suggest that the monks are probably slowing down, and the monks are busy in a space of contemplation. They are experiencing awe, and maybe that's another way we do these kind of things, Laura, is to reconnect. We can connect to ourselves by actually seeing the world around us for a change. Awe is a lovely thing. Curiosity is a lovely thing. To spend a couple of seconds looking and studying and observing these things. We've all seen small kids and the way they interact with the world in the most marvelous ways. We have a puppy. Everything is interesting to the puppy. Every single thing, And like, I watch him. I have to bring her for a walk most mornings because kids don't get up early. And I just watch her chase smells that I can't sense or see in the world. And she's chasing them, and you can watch the different things that her nostril go. She's so in that moment, being in that space and enjoying it for what it is. Like, she doesn't have any questions. Like a cat doesn't have an existential crisis as to whether it's a cat or not. Like it doesn't. It just cats. That's what it does. And there's a bit more of that, getting closer to that for us. Like, what is it, the being of the human as opposed to the doing of the human?
No, and I think that's so true. I think we get so lost to the noise. We lose the sense of the moment and the preciousness of the moment and the detail of literally what is in that minutiae. And I think that's, when we can come back to that. And I think there's another part that kind of springs to mind is, actually what if reconnection isn't because we're reconnecting with something out there, it's because we're reconnecting with whatever's within us, that joy. And we've talked about the joy. I mean, I know very intimately that I want to feel alive, and I will go out and seek those things to feel alive. Carl's very happy that we've talked and that the monks are contemplating. So to close, what would you like to share as a final thought to the world, Mark, apart from monks contemplating?
I think in a simple way, we don't owe anyone anything apart from what we owe to ourselves. We owe to ourselves the possibility to be free, the possibility to just be, to allow. I find it so interesting that for so many of us, we put these rules and requirements on ourselves to do certain things in certain ways. And like when we peel everything back, you know, we consider too many things. We give importance to too many things that aren't important and don't give enough importance to what really is. You know, and that's a really good and healthy place to start. What's really important in our lives? There is the cat.
What do you have to just appear with cat faces, Mark? I mean, well, another evening passes where monks and cats materialize, but yes, thank you again. Until next month, when we might continue this conversation a little bit further. Have a wonderful evening, one and all.
Thanks all.